don't get too caught up in making a plan if that's not the kind of person that you are. But if you are very meticulous and very planned, yeah, that can work too.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumi Tech and sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Turing, Upwest Labs, and Hillel at Stanford. Navigating through life's different decisions is very, very difficult. Welcome Ido Sarig, Chief Marketing Officer at Indiggo.ai. Ido is a product marketing and corporate development executive and former VC. He was the general manager of the Internet of Things group at Wind River and the VP of product marketing for its testing business unit. Earlier, he was the CMO of BDNA, and before that, a partner with Thomas Weisel Venture Partners, where he focused on enterprise software. He began his career with Mercury Interactive as a VP of product marketing and the VP of technology strategy.
Ido Sarig, thank you for joining me on 20-Minute Leaders. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thank you very much for having me.
I'm excited to have you all the way from Palo Alto right now.
All the way from Palo Alto at the moment, although later in the year, hopefully from the East Coast, where I'm going to be relocating to be a little bit closer to my daughters who are going to college on the East Coast.
Wonderful. Ido, is such a phenomenal career in so many different places, primarily in the worlds of product marketing, corporate development, transitioning through different types of companies in the tech sphere, most recently doubling down on AI companies, and both early stage, as board member and advisor, but also late stage with a VC stint in the middle. So a lot to be discussed here. But what I really like to start with is a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the way you go through your career, how you went through your career, and some of the insights that now in retrospective you're able to say, okay, now I understand sort of the the big ideas of why I did what I did.
All right, that's an excellent starting point. I think if you wanted me to describe how I went about my career, I think a not unfair characterization would be to call it haphazardous, in the sense that it wasn't fully planned. I think, broadly speaking, when I look at friends and colleagues in the industry, if I want to paint with very broad brushstrokes, there are two kinds of people. There are people who are very well organized, pre-planned. They knew already when they graduated high school exactly what they wanted to do, and they set a goal for themselves. And a typical goal was, I'm going to start my own company where I'll be the CEO, and ideally I'd take it public or I'd sell it for a nice exit. But in order to get to that point, there are a number of milestones that I need to accomplish. I need to maybe get a good technical education at a good school, and then I need to get a job in one of the high-tech companies, in an engineering role or some other technical role, and then I need to get an MBA from a good business school, and then branch out with my own company, and so on and so forth. I was never like
Sounds like a great plan.
It sounds like a great plan, and I do know quite a few people who are able to follow that plan to the T almost. Some of them came to me at certain points in my career to ask for advice about what's the next step. And honestly, I could only usually give them guidance about what is the next immediate step, because I myself do not belong to that group of people. I was not quite so well planned. The only thing I knew when I went to high school was that I liked computers, and I thought I might want to do something related to computers. So when I finished my Army service, I went to the Technion, and my initial thoughts were I was going to do computer science, but macroeconomic factors at the time, this was Israel was going through a very serious downturn in the software industry, impacted by the cancellation of the Levy project and so on. And there was a lot of uncertainty about future job prospects for software engineers. So just in order to Yeah, it's hard to think. It's hard to imagine that today, right? But those
I
were the
was about
days.
to say that, I'm going to university now, and it almost feels like, when I even talk to middle schoolers, they already know exactly, what they want to do with computers, in what world, in what industry, and what they want to study with it. And it's hard for me to imagine a world where you're saying, I want to be a software engineer, but I don't know if that's the best thing for me. I don't know if that's going to get me a good job later on.
Exactly. So just in order to increase my job prospects, I ended up, the Technion had just recently opened this joint course project where you could get a degree in computer engineering that, I got in through the computer science, the faculty of computer science, but it also required you to take a lot of more hardware courses in conjunction with the electrical engineering. And I thought, that's just hedge our bets, have some hardware component in that. But it was not done because I love hardware so much. I still don't. Don't get me wrong. I think that it was a very valuable education, and I think it did give me a leg up on some other people. And I'll tell you a funny little anecdote that relates to that in a moment. But I didn't do it because I wanted to be involved with hardware. I did it to increase job prospects. And as it turned out, by the time I graduated, things had turned around, and there was plenty of software jobs in Israel, and I never looked back. The funny anecdote is, I think a lot of people who go through very academic focused computer science curricula don't really get a firm grasp on what the computer is underneath. We had, while I was working at Mercury, many years ago, we were developing a product called, initially it was called, the product I was working on was called XRunner, which was a functional regression testing tool for the X Windows system. Most of your listeners probably have no idea what I'm talking about these days.
I barely have an idea what you're talking about.
It was the precursor to to modern windowing systems like Windows, but it was running on the Unix operating system, and we had just started porting it, creating a version of it for Windows, and we had developed product called Windrunner, which was the equivalent for the Microsoft Windows system. And we were working on a product for OS2. Yes, there was something like that, those way back then. And also for the Mac. And along comes a recent college graduate who shall remain nameless, and she was assigned to work on this Mac Runner project. And a couple of weeks into her job, she comes and she talks to her manager, and she says, I really don't understand why we're putting all this work into this porting. Why can't we just take the code that is currently running on this PC and, you take copy it over and put it on the Mac, and it'll run on the Mac, won't it? So it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the underlying computer architecture. And admittedly, this is an outlier case. I don't mean to disparage computer science academics in any way, but I do think that the hardware, having this understanding of the hardware was very important.
Is it as important today, do you think, to have that core, that foundational understanding? Because I think that speaks a lot to, these growing trends saying, maybe academia is not for everybody. Maybe you don't need to know the ins and outs and the zeros and ones. Maybe you're good enough to just know the really high level, the high level standards to be able to just, code the regular things we see in our day to day. How relevant is that information, do you think, today?
Okay, I think it's two separate questions, really. One is the relevance of academia, and the second one is the hardware question. The hardware question, I think it's still important, but it's less important. I think the industry has evolved to a point where there is a level of abstraction and a level of pre-built, reusable components, especially if you're doing cloud development, that you could come up with a great idea and implement it using high-level structures without having to ever worry about the underlying infrastructure. So it's less important than it used to be. It's important for the people who build this infrastructure, of course, but if you're talking about building an application or a cloud-based service, it's far less important. The academia question is interesting. most of the people I've worked with in my career had formal academic training. They were
Right.
CS or double E graduates. And I do think there is a lot to be said for having formal training in academic disciplines. I see that especially as my daughters go to school now in the U.S., they are not directly following in their father's footsteps, I'll say. They both are pursuing an undergraduate degree in a liberal arts college. And when I went on college tours with them prior to joining, honestly, those the tours rubbed me the wrong way. But
Really?
yeah, they did for several reasons. One is, broadly speaking, you've seen one, you've seen them all. And so after the fifth one, I had it up to here because they're all saying the same things, right? And this is true not just for liberal arts colleges, it's true across the board. Whether you go to a large public research university or a small liberal arts college, I can give you the tour for a generic college right now. You can, if you come here and here only, you can design your own major if we don't have one for you. We have 2,000 different clubs, and if there's one that you don't like, you can create your own. We do study abroad. They're all exactly the same. But having said that, I do think that they have one thing right, which is if they do their job properly, they give the kids a good tool set with which they could do anything. So in my current role right now, I'm looking to hire an intern for a research project, which has to do with looking at a company's mission statements and purpose statements and so on, and analyzing them in different ways. And I'm about to hire a liberal arts college student who is studying German studies. It has absolutely nothing to do with technology or computer, but impressed me in terms of the skills that she picked up at this very good school that she's going to. And it really doesn't matter. So there's a strong current right now, driven by people like Peter Thiel and others, that says you don't need to get a college degree. Come here, I'll give you $100,000 to work on your idea. And I think that could work, but I think that people that are coming out of academia tend to be more rounded. And yes, while you could certainly learn how to program in Python very easily online and for free doing a Coursera course, and if you've got a natural inclination or talent for that sort of thing, you could become a very good programmer. But I don't think becoming a very good entrepreneur is synonymous with being a very good programmer.
Right, or I think even engineer, right? I mean, what encapsulates engineering, it's much more beyond just this idea of learning how to code. It's about problem solving, and it's about being exposed to all these different problem sets. And I think I have to admit that before I went to go and begin my studies at my institution, I was very skeptical of whether it makes sense for me to even go study. I served for 5 years in the IDF in the cybersecurity unit, which in itself is considered a university to many, and at the same time, now, after almost 2 years in my institution, I just realized how amazing it is and how mind-opening it is to be exposed to just these different problems, even if they are not necessarily relevant to my later day-to-day life. Just being exposed to them and allowing myself to immerse in them and to think critically about how I would go about solving them, I think it really trains me into bringing that open mind to the N+1 problem that inevitably we'll solve as engineers and entrepreneurs later on. Ido, I'd love to hear also a little bit about your take as you go through these organizations, making an impact, whether it's through product marketing or corporate development. Tell me a little bit about it. What drives you in these companies? And when you enter a new company or in an existing company, how do you actually see your scope of work, and how do you measure your own productivity or your own milestones, making sure that you're doing the best that you can do?
It's an excellent question. I'll tackle the last question first. I'm a very results-oriented person, and ultimately the way I measure my impact or my team's impact is against pre-established goals. What did we say we were going to do, and to what degree did we meet them, and to what degree did we meet them on time? That is primary. I think that's different, though, from the question you initially thought, which is when you go into a company, what excites you, or what makes you want to devote yourself to that. And that, first and foremost, I think is about the people there. I'm less enamored with specific technologies and more so with the team that I'll be working with. I'll let you in on what is probably not a very big secret. My second job out of college was with Mercury Interactive. Mercury Interactive was in the field of automated software testing. When I joined, I struggled to find something that I thought would be more boring than software testing. In my mind, testing as a discipline, it was where the programmers who couldn't hack it as developers would go. They'd go and test other people's work. And we're going to develop software that will help them do their testing job better. No big deal. But it actually was a tremendous journey, first and foremost, because the company was amazing, but also the people that I worked with. I've since then never had in one place such a collection of great people. I've worked with individuals who are in other places who are just as good, but as a company, I haven't seen a pair. So going back to the last part, it's a question of how well you do against objectives. I think that's actually what attracted me to the company where I'm currently at, or just recently started working for, Indiggo, which its mission, its purpose in life is to help organizations turn their strategy into focused execution. What it attempts to solve using AI and software as a service delivery model is this common problem that we all, I'm sure, have experienced at one point or another in our careers, which is companies struggle to put strategy into practice. And it's the more mature the company is, the bigger it is, the longer it's been around, the harder it is to innovate and come up with new things. And so what companies do is they go on these management retreats or offsite where all the senior leaders of the company come together and decide, here are the three most important things we need to do in order to beat the competition or just to survive and thrive. And while you're at the retreat, everybody is fully on board and there's clear understanding across all the teams of what needs to be done. And then you go back to the office, and within 2 to 3 weeks, it's all dissipated away because you got distracted by day-to-day tasks and putting out fires and so on. And we want to solve that problem and actually hold you in certain ways accountable to here's what you said was important to you. Are you actually working on those important things? And what is the impact that those things made to your organization's goals?
I think that's amazing. And now looking sort of at the young entrepreneur sphere, whether it's an engineer coming out of a university or out of the IDF or somebody who's creating their own company, what are some things that you can think of from your years of experience that you would say, I think both, on an emotional level, on what should be the next step? So you're mentioning that your journey was almost haphazardous, but at the same time, I believe that now as reflecting back, I think there's a clear reason as to every decision. But what would be some of the things that we should be keeping in mind as young entrepreneurs and engineers? Do we follow our gut? Do we follow our emotions? Do we follow our intellectual curiosity? Do we follow the right people? Is there even a way to know, or is it all just a big balagan that every person has to sort of guess at the end?
My biggest takeaway, reflecting on my career, is that there's no right answer. There's no one formula that says do this and this will work. For some people, having a clear plan and executing it every step of the way is the way to go. For other people, doing things more haphazardly and just making the right decision at each point in time works equally well. That's certainly the way I've handled it. So my advice would be don't get too caught up in making a plan if that's not the kind of person that you are. But if you are very meticulous and very planned, yeah, that can work too. Regardless of which approach you take, I think it's helpful to get an outsider's view. Some go through a formal process of mentorship and getting people who would regularly coach them. That's certainly a way to go. Others have a few trusted advisors that they would go to in certain points of time when there's a critical decision to be made, just to get an outsider's opinion or a second pair of eyes. That works well too. I want to touch on what you said about following your passion. I'm ambivalent about that. On the one hand, yes, you don't want to be in a position where you are working at a job that you hate, that you dread Mondays to the extent where Sundays afternoons are already overshadowed by these dark clouds on the horizons because you know that you're going to start work in a few hours and you hate your job. You certainly don't want to be there. But I also think that at the same time, I think the advice of just follow your passion is not one that I give my kids. I think that could, because we live in a real world where you need to get a job that supports you and supports your family. And while money can't buy happiness, it certainly makes life's journey much easier. And if you don't have money and if you're struggling to make ends meet, then even if the job is your passion, you're not going to be happy. So you need to find some sort of a happy medium between these. And I'm certainly not a proponent of follow your passion no matter what. I mean, if your passion is reading philosophy books, I think making a living as a philosopher is tough. It's not something I would recommend.
I love the idea of balance. I think that what I've noticed and what's been bothering me about this question as well is, the choosing like a zero-sum approach, right? You either follow your passion or you don't. And that's not the case. And I think what you're referring here is a balance. There needs to be a good balance, both being very intentional and meticulous about following things that are interesting to you, at the same time having this realism, right? And understanding that, it's not necessarily, it's not just if you follow your diehard passion, that's, you have to still, it's not going to be a passion for a long time if it doesn't help you, survive and be successful in life. So there needs to be some balance. And I think that I get inspired, while reading your fun fact that, it sounds like one of your passions is cycling, right? And you don't have to have a profession in cycling or do that, in your 9 to 5, 9 to 7, 9 to midnight job, but you can still do that quite intensively, and it's fantastic. Ido, I really want to thank you for coming here. 20 minutes go by way too fast. I really appreciate it. I have the most important question that's still ahead of us, which is 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
I'm a realist. I call it as I see it.
I love it. I'm a realist. I love it. Ido, toda rabah. Thank you very, very much. And stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you very much, and same to you. Stay safe out there. Hopefully this will be behind us soon.